Mommy, there's a worm in your soup. Plassau, June 1944. The brief morning of Zalapel is followed by a work lineup of thousands of inmates. The dreaded capos arrive, and each capo selects several hundred workers for his commando from among us. The word capo means supreme authority over life and death. Delegated absolute power by the SS, the capos of Plassau, as if they had made a pact with the devil, exercise all methods of control, brutal beatings and torture to death, with relish. They seem to rise above the need for human response or contact, even among each other. I observe with dread the awesome figure of our capo standing high on a rock or boulder, whip in hand. Several younger assistants snap to his command. If you stop to rest for a moment, the capo instantly dispatches one of his boys and the lash whips you back to your routine. Where the lad strikes tempered with a touch of compassion, the capo would admonish them from his high perch. "At her head, Liebling! Are you losing touch? Let her have it in the head!" If you cried out in pain, the lashings would double. In time, we learn to stifle even our whimpers. In time, we learn to endure in silence. Our work consists of Planierung, straightening the hilltop with spades and shovels in preparation for construction. The work was very difficult in the beginning. When we first arrived in the hills, we were exhausted from the mountain climbing alone, and at the start of a 12-hour workday. Now that we've become somewhat acclimatized, the work is much more bearable. The bruises on our hands have turned into calluses. Our backs got used to bending without pain. Digging, shoveling, and wheelbarrowing became endurable. If only we could stop to rest for a few minutes from time to time. Yesterday, an older woman a few feet from me stopped to rest her arms. Instead of taking the trouble of administering the whip, the young assistant picked up a piece of rock and slung it at her. The rock lashed a deep, bloody gap in the elderly lady's head, and she collapsed unconscious. The boy, taken aback, ran over to the stricken inmate and then turned apologetically to his master. The capo admonished with a devilish chuckle. "You missed, you stupid Junga! She's only fainted. You should have struck her dead." At noon, we have half an hour rest when we receive our cooked meal. It's a bowl full of potage, or cabbage soup with grain. This morning, the food arrived early. As it stood for hours in the sun, it became putrefied and alive with worms. I noticed a long white worm wiggling in Mommy's spoon as she lifted it to her mouth. I shrieked with horror. Mommy was startled. She looked at me with astonishment. "What happened?" "Mommy, there's a worm on your spoon." "Look, Mommy, there are hundreds of worms in your bowl and in mine. Look." "Nonsense. These are not worms. Eat. Leave me alone." "But, Mommy, these are worms. Live worms. They crawl. Look." I pick one of the swarming insects out of my bowl and place it on the ground. It begins crawling. Then I pick another. It, too, begins crawling. Mommy looks at me with helpless despair. "What are you trying to do? What is your objective? Tell me, what do you want of me?" I do not understand. I wanted to save Mommy from a horrible fate, disease, or death, or simply from the horror of swallowing worms. Instead, she's furious with me. My mother, the finicky lady who had been reluctant to eat in restaurants and even in friends' houses for fear the vegetables or hands were not washed thoroughly enough, who baked not only cookies and cakes, but even our daily bread at home for fear the flour in bakery goods had not been carefully sifted, now is glaring at me. "I can't leave this food. I'm very hungry. Do you want me to die of hunger?" Her voice is beyond recognition. Her facial expression is beyond recognition as she goes on. "And there are no worms in it. Say no more of it." As Mommy continues eating, I turn my bowl over, spilling its contents on the ground, and run. I sit on a boulder at a distance and begin to cry. My God, my dear God, is this actually happening?